People, what secret do you know that could destroy someone's life? My aunt was 30 and married a guy who was 70. She wanted another baby, but he had had a vasectomy years earlier. She ended up banging a 50-year-old repairman and getting knocked up. She told her husband it was a miracle, and he bought it. A few years later, her husband offed himself, and in his obituary, it listed his adult kids and said he was the proud father of a miracle baby. I can't believe she would stoop that low. His kids had to have known. She ended up living with the repairman for years, but the kid didn't know that was his real dad, even though they have the same name. Yes, my aunt even named the kid after the repairman. She thinks that I don't know, but I do. She told my mom, and my mom told me. I'm pretty sure my cousin would be destroyed if he found out. He's an adult now, so his whole life is a lie. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. My coworker, who is white, has been cheating on her white husband with a black guy. She tells her husband that she comes into the office on weekends to get work done, but in reality, she's been spending time at the other guy's house. One weekend, she and her husband dropped off an extra table from their home for an event, and I was in the office working as usual. The husband gave me a strange look when she asked me what I was doing there, mentioning that she never sees me here when she comes in on weekends. Now, she's pregnant, and I overheard her telling someone that the baby isn't her husband's. She is nervous. I'm the only black guy in the office. I'm nervous. Story 3. Acquaintance intentionally screwed with his wife's birth control to get her pregnant, because he figured the kid would keep her busy while he's sleeping around. Turns out he genuinely loves being a dad, and said the kid is the best thing that has ever happened to him. His wife was sleeping around when he did it, and there's a 50% chance the kid isn't his. Story 4. My dad passed away the day after my 15th birthday. He was working on a roof at a construction site for his company when he slipped and hit his head. His death devastated everyone, my stepmom, my stepsisters, my dad's entire side of the family, and even his Narcotics Anonymous family, who I had grown close with over the years. Just 2 weeks after his death, my stepmom dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. At the time, I didn't have much of a filter, so I immediately asked, "Whose baby is it?" She looked shocked, like the thought of being questioned hadn't even crossed her mind. But I already knew the truth. She had been sleeping with my dad's brother. My mom was actually the one who caught them multiple times, sneaking around in the middle of the night after my dad had died. She told me as soon as she found out. Now, to be fair, I don't necessarily think grieving people seeking comfort in each other is the worst thing in the world. I mean, my uncle looked exactly like my dad, and I could understand why my stepmom might have turned to him. But what I couldn't accept was the blatant lie she was trying to sell to everyone. She insisted the baby was my dad's, and I went along with it, despite knowing that 2 years before his death, my dad had a vasectomy. Still, somehow, this baby became the so-called miracle baby. Everyone around us was in awe, believing it was a final gift from my dad, something good to come out of tragedy. But I knew the truth. The only person I told at the time was my youngest stepsister. Together, we went through my stepmom's phone and found texts from my uncle to her, messages like, "I would take care of you forever if you'll let me," and "I could love you." That was all the confirmation I needed. A few months passed, and my uncle moved into my old bedroom at my dad and stepmom's house. He was helping with bills, but suddenly my stepmom kicked him out. No explanation. No reason. He ended up moving in with my mom and me, and we never asked questions because, honestly, we already knew why. Then, my stepmom came to my mom and me with another bombshell. She was planning to sue for a large sum of money and told me that if I sued alongside her, we'd all get more. But I refused. Money wasn't going to bring my dad back. It wasn't going to fix the betrayal or the lies. I wanted nothing to do with it. She ended up winning the lawsuit and giving birth to my new half-sister, who in reality was actually my cousin. But since I had been completely cut out of the money my dad left behind, my mom knew she had to fight for me. That's when we filed our own lawsuit. And that's when all hell broke loose. In court, we exposed everything. That my stepmom's miracle baby was not my father's child, that her marriage to my dad was never even legal. They had a ceremony, but never actually signed a marriage license. And that she was trying to claim an inheritance she wasn't entitled to. My stepmom refused to take a paternity test, and even changed her last name to my dad's after he died to make everything look more legitimate. In the end, we settled out of court, but the damage was already done. The truth, the real truth, shattered my relationship with nearly everyone who had once been close to my dad and stepmom. They all took her side. Even my youngest stepsister, the one I confided in, turned against me. To them, I was some cruel, selfish liar who had tried to tear apart the perfect image of their grieving widow. But I know what really happened. And deep down, I believe the truth always finds a way to come out in the end. Years later, my uncle, who I had stayed close with, finally confirmed what I had always known. He admitted to my face that he and my stepmom had been sleeping together after my dad's death, and that the baby was his. He told me that when he called my stepmom to come clean, she flat out refused to acknowledge it. Then she hung up on him. I've been disowned by my entire stepfamily because of this. They still see me as the villain, the one who ruined everything. But at the end of the day, I told the truth. And the truth always has a way of making itself known, whether they want to believe it or not. Story 5. Bob has been married to his wife for 18 years, and together they have built a life, raising 3 children. Their oldest is now in college, while the younger 2 are still at home. From the outside, they appear to be a typical happy family. But Bob has been carrying a secret for his entire life. He's gay. He always has been. When he was younger, he longed for a family, for the stability and love that came with it, and he believed that marrying a woman was the only way to achieve that. He convinced himself it was the right path, that he could suppress his true self for the sake of the life he had built. But as the years have passed, the weight of pretending has become unbearable. Bob no longer wants to live a lie, but the thought of coming out terrifies him. He doesn't know how to break the news to his wife, to his children, to the people who have only ever known him as a devoted husband and father. He fears the pain it might cause, the confusion, the potential anger or rejection. He wonders if his family will understand, or if it will shatter everything they've built together. For now, he remains silent, trapped between the desire to live authentically and the fear of losing the people he loves most. Story 6. My best friend's mom had a baby when we were in middle school, and we're all white. This is relevant. Her stepdad is white, she's white, and her mom is white. So when the baby was born looking very much like Apache, her mom just laughed it off and said, "Haha, we must have some Native American blood in our line." The dad seemed clueless or in denial, and since it's a small town, no one really said anything. Fast forward, my other best friend and I were responsible for fixing all the school's computer systems. One day, we were called in to fix a bus driver's computer because it crashed. To our surprise, the bus driver had a picture of the surprise Native American baby on his desk. The baby looked exactly like him. My friend and I have never told anyone what we know. Edit. I have no idea why the bus driver had a desk with a computer, but he also did maintenance at the school, so maybe it was related to that? Story 7. I was essentially hired to spy on my coworkers. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. My job was to monitor company emails, including HR correspondence, and report anything unusual to my manager on a weekly basis. This was during a time when a major competitor was aggressively poaching our employees, offering big pay raises to anyone willing to jump ship. Then things escalated. I was instructed to create fake social media accounts on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram to track interactions between employees and outsiders. If anyone was connecting with recruiters, posting questionable content, or doing anything the company might find concerning, like evidence of drug use, I had to report it. But the most disturbing part? They had me set up fake profiles on dating sites to find and track employees who were using them. It was full-scale surveillance, and I was the one pulling the strings. When our annual remuneration review came around, I was upfront about my job responsibilities. Within a week, the company handed me a generous severance package. When I called out my bosses, they denied everything. HR quickly stepped in, offering an even bigger payout if I signed an NDA. But I had seen this coming from day one. Every month, I backed up an external hard drive with every sensitive email I could find. I still have it, and let's just say, this company did a lot of illegal crap. Story 8. When I stopped being interested in my teenage crush, he took it really badly. He spent a long time trying to sabotage everything I did, even going as far as talking to teachers in an attempt to shut down multiple student organizations I was involved in. It's been years, but we're still not exactly each other's biggest fans. I'm not going to say anything, but I'm pretty sure his very Christian fiancée, who is waiting until marriage to be intimate and believes he is too, wouldn't be too happy to find out about the year he spent hooking up with gay men he met by posting his dong pictures on 8chan. Story 9. A former friend of mine was absolutely desperate to have a baby. She and her long-term boyfriend had been trying for over a year with no success, and it became an obsession for her. She was tracking her ovulation, taking supplements, and constantly talking about how much she wanted to be a mom. Then things took a turn. When nothing was working with her boyfriend, she started sleeping around. Anyone who could potentially get her pregnant was an option. She didn't care about the emotional fallout or the betrayal. Her only focus was conceiving. Eventually, she did get pregnant, and just like that, she stopped her affairs and went back to her boyfriend as if nothing had happened. Now 2 years later, she's playing happy families with him and their son. He has no clue that the child he's raising isn't biologically his. To address a few things, I cut ties with her when I found out about the cheating. I couldn't be friends with someone who was willing to be that deceitful. I'm not the only one who knows what really happened, but no one has told her boyfriend. He isn't on social media, and I don't have his number, so I have no way of reaching out to him directly. Looking back, I wish I had said something when it all first happened, but at the time, I was dealing with a lot in my own life and wasn't in the headspace to handle it. Even now, I keep going back and forth on whether I should do something, but I honestly don't know what the right move is. Story 10. For about a year, no one in my department was getting paid for exactly 1 lunch break per week. The issue stemmed from the fact that our students would go out into the community once a week, and on those days, we were never given a scheduled lunch break. We just worked straight through. At the time, it didn't seem like a huge deal, just something we all dealt with. It wasn't until the end of the year that I took a closer look at my pay stubs and realized that the missing lunch breaks meant we had been working an extra unpaid hour every single week. That added up to quite a bit over the course of a full school year. I brought it up with my coworkers, and we all agreed it wasn't right. So, as a department, just our school, not the whole district, we submitted vouchers for the unpaid time, which came out to roughly $400 per person. As expected, our requests were denied. However, the following week, the district suddenly implemented scheduled lunch breaks for those days, clearly an effort to quietly fix the issue without acknowledging they had been in the wrong. For some reason, we never pursued it further. No one really wanted to be bothered with it, and since the issue had technically been corrected moving forward, we just let it go. Fast forward to the summer. I sent an email to HR about a completely unrelated issue, and the HR rep I dealt with was incredibly rude. But then she made a mistake. In her response, for some reason, she decided to bring up the lunch break issue and basically admitted wrongdoing. She wrote something along the lines of, "You were specifically told not to voucher for unpaid lunch days throughout the year," and then continued on with whatever my actual email had been about. Now, I'm not someone who likes stirring up drama, especially since I actually enjoy working with my coworkers, even if the pay isn't great. But if I really wanted to, I imagine that a single email would be enough evidence to file a state complaint and probably get her fired. I just don't know if it's worth the trouble. Story 11. About 6 years ago, while I was at university in Aberdeen, I ended up living with 3 girls. At the time, I thought it would be a good idea, having roommates who were all girls, you know? It seemed like a fun way to live. But honestly, it was a terrible decision. One of the girls, let's call her Gemma, had a boyfriend named Ben. One night, after Gemma had been out drinking, she came home a bit tipsy. Her brother, Stubert, was staying with us for some reason that I can't quite recall. By this point, I was already pretty distant from the rest of them. I was only a couple of months away from finishing university, and I just kept to myself in my room, trying to make it through until I could leave. I honestly didn't pay much attention to what was going on in the house beyond my own space. The next day, I noticed that I hadn't seen or heard from Ben all day or the following morning. But later that night, when I was walking to the bathroom, I overheard some noises coming from Gemma's room. There was some moans going on, but it wasn't anything that bothered me. As long as I couldn't hear it while I was trying to sleep, I didn't care. It wasn't until the following morning, when I remembered those sounds and realized that Ben still hadn't shown up, that I started putting the pieces together. The only other guy in the house, besides me, was Stubert. That's when it hit me. I started to think, maybe Gemma had slept with her brother. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe it was an ongoing affair. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. But considering everything, it seemed likely. What I'm telling you about happened for sure, except for the names, which I've changed. The rest of it? It's definitely real. Story 12. One of my exes isn't happy with her intimate life with her fiancé. We dated for 2 semesters in college. Our relationship had its ups and downs, but she was adventurous in bed, and I was open to trying new things. So despite the occasional fights, the physical relation was amazing and kept us together longer than we probably should have been. When we broke up, it didn't end well, and she ended up dating the guy I had been rooming with. He'd had a crush on her for a while, and while he was initially upset when we started dating, he eventually got over it. That semester turned out to be a lot of fun with the 3 of us. But he's pretty vanilla when it comes to bedroom activities. She's had 2 serious relationships, her first being with me, and now she's been with him for around 8 or 9 years, and they're engaged. After we broke up, my ex and I didn't really talk for years. Things ended badly, so we only exchanged polite words when necessary. Since he was my friend and I was happy for them, I made sure to keep my distance. A few years ago, though, she and I started talking more casually online. I had begun transitioning, and she'd always joked that I'd eventually become a girl, which, well, I did, and to her surprise, I had become polyamorous. Every now and then, when she's visiting her parents, she messages me on Facebook. Usually, she's drunk, and she starts venting about how boring he is in bed, how he never wants to try anything new, how frustrated she is that she can't explore more, and how much she wishes he'd be more open-minded. I do my best to offer her support, but I never cross any lines. I tell her she should have a conversation with him about it, but she insists he won't listen. Sometimes, when she's really drunk, she starts hitting on me, reminiscing about our time when we were together, telling me how she wishes I were like I am now back then, or asking about my intimate life and wishing she could have that kind of freedom. She loves him and wants to be with him, and I know she's just venting her frustrations and not actually trying to get with me. I don't have any interest in getting involved in their relationship, so I just listen, offer advice when I can, but stay out of it. If he ever found out what she said to me, it would crush him and probably end things for good. So, I keep quiet, and I'll continue to do so. Story 13. My wife's father has a mistress who is half his age. I became suspicious when his cell phone started beeping late at night and odd hours of the morning, and how he would frequently wander off outside or into different rooms to take calls. I had that quiet little theory for months, and didn't know anything further until I started doing bookkeeping for him. There's a house he's decorated more times than any other, that he does far cheaper than everyone else. This house gets new light fittings, walls and ceilings repainted, bathrooms tiled, kitchen worktops swapped out, etc., all the time. It's in a yuppie neighborhood full of affluent young couples with too much money, so that's not entirely uncommon, as the people there are all show-off snobs trying to constantly outdo one another. But this place has had something done to it, I swear, once a month for 3 straight years. At this point, he has redone his own work several things multiple times. He has been called out to paint the ceiling of a closet, a frigging 8x8 closet. He has spent whole months doing rooms bit by bit, dirt cheap, and these seemingly tiny jobs can fill up his schedule for whole afternoons. I was finally suspicious enough to snoop on his phone, which is locked and passworded, in case he leaves it at a client's house by mistake. But I managed to get my hands on it before it locked itself. Sure enough, it was full of raunchy texts and pics from some young blonde who immediately recognize as his wife's massage therapist. This woman sends her chocolates for Christmas, while she bangs her husband silly. She's also married to skinny white-collar dweeb, who likely makes more money in 2 months than my in-law does in a whole year. I've told my wife. She wasn't surprised, and had been suspicious for a while herself. We have no idea if her mother suspects anything. Moral of the story: if you're going to have a blonde bimbo trophy wife, don't let her keep hiring the same dirt-cheap decorator. If you're going to have a massage therapist visit you in your home, and she's blonde bimbo trophy wife material, don't let her meet your husband. Story 14. One of my cousins isn't actually who he thinks he is. The dad who raised him isn't his biological father. Turns out, my aunt had an affair with one of my dad's brothers, and no one knew the truth for years. The first clue: my cousin and I don't just look like cousins, we look like brothers. And for good reasons. Our fathers are actually brothers, and our mothers are sisters, which explains the uncanny resemblance. The full truth didn't come out until my uncle offed himself. He left behind a letter, but only my grandmother was allowed to read it. That's where he spilled everything: his wife's affair, the true parentage of his son, and the secrets he had been holding on to for years. My grandmother decided my mother had the right to know, so she confided in her. Now, my mom is excellent at keeping secrets, but she also has a habit of writing everything down in her diary. And unfortunately, I had a habit of sneaking a peek at her diary around Christmas and birthdays to figure out what gifts I was getting. That's how I accidentally found out the family secret. Whoops. Quick clarification. My mom and my aunt are sisters. My mom is married to my dad. My aunt was married to my Uncle George. My aunt cheated on Uncle George with my dad's brother, Uncle Steve. My cousin, her son, is actually Uncle Steve's child, not Uncle George's. He and I look alike because our moms are sisters and our real fathers are brothers. And that's how I found out my cousin is actually my half-brother. Story 15. My partner has been cheating on me for months, possibly even longer, under the perfect cover of his job. He's a photographer, and as it turns out, he's been using his profession as an excuse to sleep with dozens of women. How did I find out? Because he's been posting videos of himself with these women on his adult work profile, which I recently managed to gain access to. I wasn't prepared for what I found. I have screenshots of thousands of explicit pictures and hundreds of intimate videos of him with at least 100 different women, maybe more. And if that wasn't shocking enough, there are also a couple of encounters with transgender women. Not that I care about that part specifically, but the fact that he was doing all of this behind my back, without protection, while coming home to me like nothing happened. That's next-level betrayal. Now, I have all the evidence I need, and I fully intend to expose him for who he really is. I'm not just going to sit on this information. I want everyone to know. I am planning on releasing this information to anyone who will listen, especially his parents and the mother of his child. Story 16. A few months after breaking up, my brother's ex-girlfriend suddenly wanted to get back together. He agreed, and about a month later, she hit him with the big news. She was pregnant, and he was the father. At the time, they were both 19, and while my brother immediately believed her, the rest of our family had our doubts. Her sonogram looked a little too far along for someone who had only been pregnant for a month. We gently tried to point this out to my brother, but he refused to listen to any suggestion that this baby might not be his. He was all in. So, as a family, we did what we thought was best. We decided to be supportive. At that point, there were no other grandkids in the family, so my mom, thrilled at the idea of becoming a grandma, started buying baby supplies, clothes, blankets, bottles, a crib, everything they'd need. Since my brother and his ex were in the process of looking for an apartment together, she kept all the baby things at her place until they could move in. Then, about a month later, everything took a turn. His ex suddenly seemed to realize that being a 20-year-old single mom wasn't what she wanted. Out of the blue, she told my brother she had decided to terminate the pregnancy. My brother was devastated. He begged her to reconsider, offering to take full custody of the baby if she would just carry the pregnancy to term and sign over her parental rights. But she refused. Instead, she broke up with him on the spot. At that point, my family was done. We had tried to support her, we had bought baby supplies, we had put aside our suspicions for my brother's sake. And now, after all that, she dumped him and expected us to just go along with it. My mom politely asked for the baby things back, so they could at least be donated to someone in need. But this girl? She refused. And here's where it gets really screwed up. She demanded my brother pay for half of the abortion costs before she would return anything. And then, after allegedly going through with it, she went out partying, drinking, clubbing, taking selfies with her friends. She started telling everyone that she had suffered a miscarriage and that my brother had dumped her because of it. It was the ultimate manipulative move, and at that point, we were just done. We told my brother to walk away, forget the baby stuff, and never look back. And thankfully, he finally did. Now, years later, he's in a happy, stable relationship with someone who actually respects him. And as for his ex, if I knew where she was now, I'd absolutely warn the next poor soul before she could do something like this again. Story 17. When I was between the ages of 7 and 9, my mom went out of her way to help a woman who was struggling. This woman, Jenny, had kids and was in a rough spot, and my mom, being the kind-hearted person she is, tried to assist her in every way she could. She helped her feed her kids, gave her support, and basically bent over backward to make her life better. In return, Jenny stole from us. She took money from my mom, along with every important document we had, birth certificates, identity-related papers, and even my mother's original engagement and wedding rings. But the worst part? She also took a family heirloom, a ruby-set pocket watch that had been passed down for generations. Jenny didn't have much of a chance to move away, so for years, she stuck in the same area. Fast forward to when I was 24 and married, and I made it my mission to track down where she worked. I'd contact her employers and tell them everything about her criminal history, everything she'd done to my family. In the end, I was the one who got her fired from 4 different jobs. So yeah, I guess you could say I make a habit of ruining her life. And I don't feel bad about it. TLDR, Jenny stole from my mom after my mom tried to help her turn her life around. So now, I spend my time making sure she has no peace. You mess with my mom, you're going to pay for it. Story 18. When I was 18 or 19, I was seeing a woman in her mid-30s. She was going through a divorce, and her husband had left the country. I was just an 18-year-old, often drunk or stoned, and looking for some fun. The physical relation was good, and she was pretty attractive. So honestly, what else was I going to do? After months of being involved with her, her husband eventually came back into the country. She started seeing him again on occasion, and I began to get a bit tired of all the drama. It was clear there was a lot of baggage, and looking back, I learned a big lesson. Never get involved with someone carrying too much emotional baggage. As it turned out, she never went through with the divorce. He knew she'd been seeing someone else, but he was doing the same thing, so I don't think either of them cared. The hardest part, though, was finding out I had an 8-year-old child out there. The guy she ended up staying with believes the child is his, and they've built a decent life together with good jobs and a stable family. They seem to be doing well from what I can tell, based on what I've seen on her Facebook. I honestly wouldn't want to come in and disrupt their family. It's clear they're doing well, and for me to try to insert myself out of any selfish reason, like wanting to be involved, wouldn't be fair to the kid or to them. Sure, I'd love to know my child, but I can also acknowledge that I've made mistakes in my life, and I'm not the best person to bring into that situation. I've always felt like a bit of a screw-up, and I'd rather the kid grow up in the stable, supportive environment they have now. Maybe in the future, things could be different. But for now, I just think it's better to leave things as they are and not complicate it. Story 19. I grew up without ever knowing my father. As an adult, I managed to track him down living in another country. Over the years, I slowly built a relationship with him and even had the chance to visit a few times. He's an interesting person, but he had no desire to return to the U.S. At the same time he left the States, his brother moved out of state and quit drinking for good. It's been decades now, and his brother has remained sober, while my father still refuses to come back to the U.S. One night, while I was visiting him, we got really drunk together. In that drunken haze, he started telling me a story about him and his brother back in a bar in the States. They'd been drinking heavily, and a fight broke out. During the fight, a man was killed. After that, my father fled the country, and his brother ran away, giving up alcohol altogether. The next morning, my father acted like nothing had happened. It seemed like he didn't even remember the conversation. I didn't bring it up again. There's no statute of limitations on murder, but it wasn't exactly a confession. I know the city, state, and year where this supposedly occurred, but I've never looked into it further. Having grown up without a father, I can't bring myself to expose him now for something that happened decades ago. But I can't help but wonder, how many others grew up without a father because of what happened back then? Story 20. Let's call my ex Tom. A few months after my sister passed away from cancer, I came home from a counseling session and found Tom quickly leaving my computer. We had been together for about 5 or 6 years, having started as college sweethearts. At that moment, something felt off. I had this nagging feeling that something wasn't right, and deep down I knew. I checked the browser history and saw that, whenever I was out of the house, he had been spending months viewing the most explicit gay porn. When I confronted him, he flew into a rage. He denied being bi or even curious, insisting that he just wanted to see what other guys looked like when they were excited. But always without any women involved. We tried counseling together for a short time, but ultimately we broke up. He then became involved with other men in a risky way. After that, he packed up and moved from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. He cut off all contact with everyone, refusing to engage with anyone from college or the years following. Then, he married another woman. Story 21. I know a guy who is currently the associate pastor at a very fundamentalist church with extremely strict views on intimate behavior. He's engaged to the daughter of the senior pastor, so his life is closely intertwined with the church's public image and values. I also happen to know his ex, who's friends with my wife. After they broke up, she confided in me about some things that happened during their relationship. Apparently, during their second time sleeping together, he asked her to put a finger in his back door. It didn't stop there. Soon enough, things escalated. For someone in his position, this is already a huge contradiction to the conservative image he has to uphold. But that wasn't all. After 6 months of dating, he managed to convince her to participate in a MMF. What made this particularly shocking was that, unlike most encounters like this, she was more of a passive participant, describing herself as pretty much a spectator. I'm not here to judge what people do in the bedroom. Everyone should be free to explore as long as it's between consenting adults. But given his position and the strict, public stance his church holds on issues like this, if anyone were to find out, it would completely ruin his life and reputation. Story 22. A friend of mine committed unemployment benefits fraud for about a year and a half. The irony of it all is that he's one of those conservatives who constantly complains about people on food stamps and welfare, calling them lazy and sucking the government. He also despises any politician who supports welfare programs. Anyway, during college, he started collecting unemployment benefits as a way to help pay for his education. There are certain time limits for how long you can collect unemployment, and you're typically supposed to get a job at some point. However, the system allows you to continue collecting as long as you can show you're making efforts to find work. My friend figured out that he could game the system by applying for jobs at places like McDonald's or Wendy's, and then simply ignoring them if they called him back. He'd also apply for positions he had no qualifications for, like a senior robotics analyst at IBM, just to make it appear that he was applying for real jobs and being rejected. As long as he showed proof that he was applying, the checks kept coming. He had no intention of actually working. He was just collecting free money. This is the same guy who would complain about Obama phones and insist that his hard-earned money shouldn't be given to people who don't want to work. This could ruin him. He's in the military, and I believe he holds some kind of government job. If it ever came out that he defrauded the government, he could face a dishonorable discharge and likely lose his job. Story 23. There was this wannabe cool kid I went to school with, and he came from a wealthy family that completely spoiled him. He started school late and spent 2 years there trying to play the role of a model, weighing easily 300 plus lbs. Artist, photographer, fashion designer, vegan blogger. Basically whatever he thought would make him look interesting, while throwing his parents' money around, attending an IT school. He acted like he was everyone's best friend, but in reality, he had no real friends except for me. Why? Because he paid me for every assignment. He'd give me 3 hours of minimum wage pay for assignments that usually took me only 5 to 15 minutes to complete. I'd just think it through, write it out at home in a readable way, and hand it to him. I got him through the program to the point where graduation was almost in reach, but he failed every single test except for one. He paid me to attend a test in his place, but of course that was never going to work, so I got paid, and was sent home because I wasn't him, thanks for that. And of course, he failed that test too, and the second attempt as well. The funny part is that his parents, seeing only my grades, thought he was doing great. They never knew he had failed every test. So, they bought him a brand new 2012 Audi. This was in 2013, which he treated as his greatest achievement. He'd rev the engine at every stop, give free rides to people just to show it off, and generally be his obnoxious self. He put a ton of mileage on the car, going from 10K to 30,000 kilometers, and by the end of it, the car looked worse than a 15-year-old one, needing constant repairs. The car cost about $30,000 back then. His parents also got him a brand new flat after he supposedly graduated, even though the graduation results were faked. Fast forward, and now he's trying to make millions with a friend. Well, his friend now owns the flat and makes him pay rent, collecting alimony from his parents for being their good boy. He also sold the Audi for around $4,000 and blew it all on drugs and weed, hosting junkie parties in his flat. His parents still think he's driving that Audi to work every day, returning to his neat apartment with his loving girlfriends. They're going to find out soon enough, though, and when his dad does, I can't imagine he's going to be too happy. To add some perspective, this all happened in Central Europe, where the average monthly wage isn't even $1,000. Story 24. 2 former colleagues of mine, one being the supervisor and the other just a general assistant like me. Ended up having a year-long affair after a night out. They kept it hidden from almost everyone until one morning, after my birthday party, I walked in on them. I had rented a flat for the occasion, and that's when I discovered it. Now, I knew from being friends with them both that he didn't use condoms. This will be important later. During this time, our older supervisor got married to her boyfriend of 4 years, who was a very successful lawyer, making 6 figures. They decided to buy a house together, and he handed over a £400,000 deposit on a £1.1 million home. Fast forward a month after they moved in, and she finds out she's pregnant, something she had always wanted. She's convinced it's her husband's child. But either way, it doesn't get any crazier than finding out that the guy who had been sleeping with your wife for over a year is offered a job by her husband to work as his apprentice. I'm a bit late to this story, but I hope some of you actually read this far. Honestly, it's a pretty messed up situation to find yourself in. Story 25. My older brother is best friends with 2 guys that are twins. One of them was really drunk a few years back and told me how he walked in and caught the other brother in the middle of slurping their mate's popsicle, plus how they were both half-bare. They both keep it a secret as I'm far aware of, and I'm pretty sure the brother that told me doesn't know he told me everything. When you look at his body language and discover his interests, it's a no-brainer. He goes to Thailand, just add to his tattoos nearly every year. Yeah. Fast forward to recently, and the popsicle-eating brother, that has never had a girlfriend, is courting and dating this gorgeous girl, a close family friend of his sister, for a long while, pretty sure just to please his family. His mum said to me she is so happy. It made my heart drop when she told me. I would say I feel bad for the girl, but after I first met her, she kept messaging me on Facebook and then pretty much straight up asked me out. I just ignored her messages and fobbed her off saying the Facebook Messenger app was playing up on my phone. If it wasn't because of the whole don't crap where you eat situation, I probably would have tried to hook up with her. Story 26. I know a guy who has a really laid-back wife, and I only met her after knowing him for years. Over time, we became close, especially after we went through some tough stuff together. Stuff that ultimately ended up breaking our friendship. Before they got married, though, her husband used to email her best friend, trying to get her into bed. The best friend never told my friend about the emails, but she did send me copies of them. I still have those emails, and the only people who know about them are her and I. I haven't said anything to my old friend about this because of her own past. A year before she started dating her now husband and 2 years before I even met her, she began an affair with a married man, a guy I had worked with for years before that and was also an ex of hers. When she finally had a conscience about it, she threatened to expose him to his wife. A week after that, the man walked in on his family having Thanksgiving dinner and shot himself in front of them. I could easily destroy her marriage with those emails, but I'd rather she find out on her own. If that happens, I'll show her the emails then. One good turn deserves another, after all. Story 27. So here's the situation. My immediate boss, whom we'll call, and her boss, my manager, whom we'll call John, are actually sleeping together. Let me tell you how I found out. And talks to my wife sometimes. My wife and I work in the same department, and Ann and my wife became good friends when they went to another state to open a new facility. And would always boast about her boyfriend, claiming he makes $70K a year and manages a facility. She would never say where he works, but she made it clear she couldn't say, like it was some kind of secret. At first, I didn't think much of it, but it was starting to seem a bit suspicious. Then one day, my wife calls me and tells me that Ann's boyfriend is visiting her. He's hiding out in the hotel room because Ann is outside knocking on the door and quickly rushing in as soon as it opens. She even mentioned that and checked the hallway to make sure nobody saw him. Okay, that definitely piqued my curiosity. So I started thinking, her boyfriend probably works at my facility. The next day, I asked around at work, casually inquiring which managers weren't in that day. Wouldn't you know it, the one manager who wasn't there was John. Just to confirm, I asked another manager if John was in, and I found out he was out on sick leave for the week. At lunch, I called my wife and told her that I had figured out who Ann's boyfriend is. The look on her face when I told her it was John, priceless. The next day, my wife meets up with Ann for breakfast, and while they're talking, she tells Ann that she knows who her boyfriend is. As soon as my wife said it was John, and immediately told her, "You can't tell anyone." Now, I'd love to spread this information because Ann is a gruff when it comes to me. Every chance she gets, she'll criticize me for things that are beyond my control. If someone needs to be sent to another department to balance headcount, guess who gets picked? Me. And if I were to tell higher-ups about this, they'd likely fire John for favoritism. It's happened before with other managers, and move and to another facility. The reason I don't spill the beans is, well, as much as I'd love to watch the world burn, I'm not the one to start the fire. Oh, and just to clarify, this would actually ruin John more than Anne. Anne's relationship with him is pretty transparent. She's only with him for his paycheck. John's only 23, and his prior job experience was at Taco Bell. If he loses his job, he's not just risking his career. He's risking Anne. Story 28. I've been holding this in for too long, and I need to get it off my chest because I haven't told anyone. So, I'm in the National Guard. I'm 34 and single. Last year, a 20-year-old woman in our unit, who was also single, started showing interest in me. There wasn't anything legally stopping us from dating, since we're both close in rank and aren't in the same chain of command. She's cute, and she lives near me, so we started hanging out. She's in college and has her own place, so I went over to her place a few times. Things escalated pretty quickly. One night, we spooned at her place, and it was clear she wanted things to go further. I didn't make a move because I felt like she wasn't quite ready. Even if she seemed into it in the moment, I thought she might regret it later, so I held back. The next morning, she told me she wished I had made a move, but then she also confessed something. A couple of months prior, she had done everything except intercourse with another guy in our unit. This guy is married, outranks her by quite a bit, and is her direct supervisor. In the military, that kind of relationship isn't just frowned upon, it's illegal. This guy is well respected, and everyone I know is friends with him. I really don't have anyone I can talk to about this, and even my family has connections with these people since we're all close-knit. I promised her I wouldn't tell anyone, and I haven't. The next day, she had a mission outside of drill with him. I knew she was going to see him, and she didn't respond to any of my calls or texts the entire night. The next day, she told me nothing happened with him, but she was different after that. She started pushing me away, and we ended things romantically. I have a strong feeling she might have lied and did something with him that night, but I can't be sure. Now I still see her at drill. She flirts with me and jokes about me not trying to hang out with her. But the thing is, she's never asked me to do anything or even told me when she's free. To make matters worse, he moved out of her group and is now my team leader and direct supervisor. I'm not sure if anything happened between them since that night, but I have a feeling it did. I don't look at him the same anymore. I just see him as a sleazeball now, and I'm not thrilled about moving forward with my team. There's more to the story, like how he's had a marriage with dead bedroom for years, but it just feels good to finally say all of this, even if no one else ever sees it. Story 29. My uncle married my aunt, but what he doesn't know is that my aunt's parents tried to end my mom and all of my uncles, including him. It's a more complicated situation than I'm making it out to be, but here's the gist. Back in the 60s, my family had all of their cattle stolen, which was their livelihood. My grandpa lost $500,000 in capital, a huge sum, especially back then. To avoid any further trouble or legal action, my aunt's parents threatened to kill the whole family. So, my grandpa had to back off. It's not really a secret. It's something that's well known, but both of them still deny it. My aunt is a terrible person. I can't stand her. Oh, and my uncle was killed by a drunk driver, who just happened to be their son. It was eerily close to another dispute we had with them. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this whole thing is that my cousin is named after my uncle who passed away. He was the brother my uncle looked up to the most. Story 30. I'm the other man, in a situation with an ex-girlfriend who's currently in a relationship with a much older guy. He spoils her and her daughters with lavish gifts and vacations, making it all look perfect from the outside. I have the power to completely destroy everything with a few simple emails. Emails she sent me, where she confesses how awful intimacy is with him and how just seeing him makes her shudder. She even says how much she still loves me and that I'll always be the love of her life. But here's the kicker. She truly believes she's helping her daughters by staying with him. I'm honestly not sure how teaching her two teenage daughters that it's okay to be with someone you don't like, just for material gain, is doing them any favors. But at this point, I'm torn. I could just keep using her for my own pleasure and watch her entire mess unravel. And on top of all that, she's still technically married to someone else, though they're separated. The father of her children, who's in the military and stationed 9 hours away, has no idea his kids are living in this rich old man's house. She's even got the kids lying to their dad and grandmother about where they're staying. Real class act, right? Story 31. There's a guy who transferred to my college from another school, and for the longest time, I thought he was gay. He had this way of walking and talking, and he wore jeans that made you unintentionally notice his bum. I'm not someone who normally notices that kind of thing, but with him, it was hard to ignore. I just assumed he was closeted because he seemed really religious and against anything like that. So, I asked a friend and found out he was raised by a single mom, which led me to believe he was just more effeminate, and I dropped the whole thing. However, he started doing some really annoying things. He'd follow a guy into the bathroom or stay at my buddy's dorm until like 3 a.m., being so loud that he'd wake him up. That got him dropped from our friend group really quickly. Then he went on to make fun of the same friend for his physical disability, spreading lies about him and splitting up our group for nearly an entire semester. He did the same thing to a few other groups around campus, causing drama everywhere he went. Eventually, things settled down, and he became a loner who just kept his distance from us. Then, I found out from another friend who went to the college he transferred from that he actually is gay. Turns out, his old college disliked him too and basically forced him out. One night at a party, he decided to come out, and he ended up hooking up with a bunch of guys there. The people at the college gave him a lot of crap for it, so he went back into the closet and started pretending to be super religious. Now he acts all homophobic and goes around bullying people in the worst ways, like making fun of someone for a physical impairment they were born with. His new friend groups have no idea what kind of person he really is. They don't know he's a bully, or that he's a closeted gay guy who hooked up with a ton of people at that party. Story 32. I know a married bisexual woman who's heavily involved in her church and has a psychology degree. She wants to become a counselor. During a rough patch in my marriage, this woman became a friend to my wife, offering support. She did everything right, and my wife, who isn't bisexual, started developing feelings for her. The woman encouraged my wife to go behind my back with her, and when I found out, the woman suggested we try a polyamorous relationship. Her husband reluctantly agreed, and out of fear of losing my wife and son, I agreed too. I worked on improving myself, sought counseling, and told my wife how much the situation was hurting me. They hadn't gone past kissing, and my wife didn't really want it to go further. But when she ended things with the woman lost it. She threatened to off herself, pressured my wife to leave me, spread rumors that I was abusing my wife, and would sulk around her trying to get pity. It turned out that during those 6 weeks, the woman had been telling my wife that they should both divorce their husbands to live out their lesbian dreams and raise my son together. Now, things in my marriage are back to normal and amazing, but if this woman tries to mess with my family again, I won't hesitate to expose what she did to every counseling service in her church. Story 33. My younger brother has no idea that our parents aren't exactly the picture-perfect couple he believes them to be. My mother never loved my father. She had her heart set on a man she knew from her job, but he was 10 years older, Filipino, and Catholic, none of which were acceptable in our small-town community in the 50s, where the expectation was to stay with your own kind. So, instead of marrying the man she loved, she followed her parents' wishes and married the high school dropout who worked at the gas station down the street. She never loved him. Even though she married my father out of obligation, she continued to correspond with the man she truly loved until his murder in the late 80s. He lived in San Francisco, was very wealthy, and never stopped loving her. Before I went to college, she confided in me that she had stayed with my dad because she was trying to be a good Christian wife, raising children and playing the role she was expected to. As they grew older, she grew to hate my father more, but she didn't have the courage to leave him. He's an ignorant atheist, and I use that term loosely, but still tries to get her to watch what he calls Christian porn, the kind that's disturbing and messed up, and get her to engage in it with him. Now that they're both retired, things have only gotten worse. Everyone in our family knows what a terrible, abusive person my father has always been, especially toward me. Honestly, I'm not even sure my younger brother is really his son. I've always suspected my mother had an affair, and my younger brother might be the result. I stopped speaking to both of them many years ago, but my younger brother has always idolized them, putting them on a pedestal as if they represent some kind of ideal life. If he ever knew the truth about our parents, it would destroy him. Story 34. About 5 years ago, I had a brief fling with this British exchange student. Let's call him M. Last year, he found me on Facebook, and we would occasionally chat, nothing inappropriate, just casual conversation. At some point, he seemed to get more comfortable and started sending unsolicited explicit photos and even videos. And I'm not talking about the usual kind of stuff. You know, the usual pics or maybe a flirtatious moment. No, he sent me 3 separate videos of him messing with his soft dong. I couldn't understand why he thought I'd be interested in that, so I did some digging and realized the strange pics and videos were sent late at night, around weekends. My guess? He gets drunk and makes poor decisions. Now, I'm not single. My partner and I are super close. We were best friends before we got together, and I'd told him all about him back when it happened in college. Also, I'm in the States, while M is in the UK. So my partner has known about M and has been part of the saga from day one. At first, we both found it pretty amusing, and sometimes my partner would even reply to M's messages, sometimes revealing it was him, sometimes not. But then M casually mentioned he has a girlfriend, who he lives with, and they've been together for about 2 years. Of course, they're not Facebook official, and I'd never met her since I live across the world. The pictures and videos were fun and strange at first, but knowing now that he has a girlfriend, I don't find it funny anymore. She definitely doesn't know what's been going on, and I can't imagine she'd be okay with it. M claims he hasn't been cheating on her, and I don't have concrete proof otherwise, but I have plenty of evidence of behavior that would likely upset her. If he feels comfortable sending all this stuff to me, someone far away, how do I know he isn't doing the same to someone else closer to home? If my partner were acting like this, I'd definitely want to know. Now I'm left feeling guilty and unsure of what to do. I know I haven't done anything wrong, but I also haven't figured out the right thing to do. Story 35. My uncle ended my grandfather. My grandfather was 95 in constant pain and nearing the end. Instead of hospice, the doctors allowed him to spend his final days at home, where he was surrounded by family. After a particularly difficult night, my uncle, a surgeon, was called to help. He arrived with painkillers and administered them to my grandfather, who quickly relaxed, his discomfort easing. Then, my uncle knelt in prayer alongside my grandmother and a few others in the room. They prayed together for several minutes. When my uncle finished, my grandfather took his last breath and passed away peacefully. My family, deeply religious, saw it as divine timing. God had called him home at the perfect moment. I, on the other hand, see it differently. I believe my uncle administered a lethal dose, fully aware of how long it would take effect. He likely timed the prayer so that by the time he finished, my grandfather's suffering would be over. That said, I view it as an act of compassion. My grandfather had been a doctor himself, and I suspect he knew what was happening. I've never voiced my thoughts to my family, and if anyone else has similar suspicions, they've kept silent. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.